Marcelo Bielsa, one of the most respected football minds on the planet, sitting frozen on his Powerade box as the clock ticks deep into stoppage time. His Uruguay side, two-time world champions, packed with history, reputation, and elite-level talent, are not controlling the story. Across the pitch, the real story is dancing. Cape Verde players are celebrating every clearance like a goal, fighting for every loose ball like their lives depend on it, and refusing to behave like a team that is simply happy to be here. A nation made up of 10 small islands in the Atlantic, a population of just over 500,000 people, a country many casual fans would struggle to find on a map, and yet here they are, taking points from one of football's historic powers. This is the image of the World Cup that FIFA never expected, and maybe deep down, never really wanted. Because this tournament was expanded from 32 teams to 48. Officially, it was sold as football becoming more global, more inclusive, more open to countries that had never had a real chance before. But behind the romance, there was always another reason: money. More teams means more matches. More matches means more tickets, more TV rights, more sponsors, more markets, and more revenue. The idea was simple. Let the smaller nations arrive, give the world a few emotional stories, then watch the giants take over when the serious football begins. Spain, Brazil, Germany, Argentina, France, England. Those are the names that bring the biggest audiences and the biggest commercial value. But something went wrong. The small nations did not come to fill space. They came to steal the tournament. And now FIFA is watching its own expanded format create the one thing it fears most: a World Cup where the underdogs are not just participating, they are changing everything. The first warning sign came from Cape Verde. Their opening match was not supposed to be a contest. It was supposed to be a historic moment, yes, their first ever World Cup game, but also a reminder of the gap between football's giants and football's newcomers. Their opponent was Spain, the reigning European champions, a team filled with technical quality, elite midfielders, world-class structure, and some of the most exciting young players in football. Pedri, Lamine Yamal, Rodri, a squad built from Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Europe's biggest clubs. On paper, it looked impossible. But football does not care about paper. Cape Verde defended with discipline, played with courage, and their 40-year-old goalkeeper, Vozinha, produced a heroic performance. Save after save, he turned Spanish frustration into disbelief. Spain could not break them. The match ended 0-0. At first, people tried to explain it away. Maybe Spain were rusty. Maybe it was just a bad day. Maybe Cape Verde had used up all their luck in one match. But then came Uruguay, and that is when the fluke theory died. Uruguay were not just another big name. They were two-time world champions, 15-time Copa America winners, and a country with football history written into its national identity. They had stars, they had experience, they had Bielsa. Cape Verde had belief. And in the 20th minute, belief became history. Kevin Pina stepped up for a free kick from distance. The Uruguayan wall split. The shot flew through, and suddenly Cape Verde had scored their first ever World Cup goal. Not in a consolation defeat, not in a meaningless match, against Uruguay. They were leading. For a moment, the entire football world had to pause. This was no longer a cute story. This was no longer just a debutante nation enjoying the occasion. Cape Verde were herding giants. Uruguay eventually responded. 2 soft goals turned the game around. and for a while it looked like normal order had been restored. That's usually what happens in World Cups. The smaller team fights bravely, the bigger team survives, and everyone applauds the effort. But Cape Verde refused to accept that ending. A defensive mistake from Uruguay opened the door, and Elder Varela walked through it. He finished calmly, scored his first ever goal for his country, and then led his teammates into a celebration that felt bigger than football. On the sideline, Bielsa sat motionless. On the pitch, Cape Verde danced. The match ended 2-2. 8 minutes of stoppage time came and went, and it was Cape Verde, not Uruguay, finishing with energy, courage, and momentum. After the match, Bielsa admitted that Uruguay had been disorganized. He said that being the better team on paper still had to be proven on the pitch. That sentence sums up the entire tournament. The Giants can no longer rely on reputation. They have to prove it. And Cape Verde forced the world to notice. So who are these players who suddenly turned the World Cup upside down? Cape Verde is a small island nation off the west coast of Africa, made up of 10 islands and a population of a little over 500,000 people. But their football identity stretches far beyond those islands. Their squad is built from the Cape Verdean diaspora, players connected through family, heritage, and pride, representing clubs across Europe and beyond. This is not a squad built from one domestic league or one traditional football system. It is a patchwork. Players from different countries, different clubs, different football cultures, different journeys. But somehow, when they wear that shirt, they look like one team. That is what makes their story so powerful. They qualified the hard way. They started with a draw against Angola. They were heavily beaten by Cameroon. At that point, many people would have assumed the dream was already fading. But Cape Verde responded by winning 7 of their final 8 qualifying matches and finishing above Cameroon, 5-time African champions. That is not luck. That is resilience. That is a team that learned how to suffer, recover, and believe. Now, after 2 World Cup matches, Cape Verde are not just celebrating participation, they are looking at the knockout rounds. One more win could send them into the last 32. Think about that. A country that had never played a World Cup match before this tournament is now 90 minutes away from the knockout stage. That is the kind of story FIFA loves to promote in highlight packages, but it is also the kind of story they terrify behind closed doors, because every underdog that survives means a bigger football nation could go home, and that's where the romance of football starts to clash with the business of football. Cape Verde are not alone. On the other side of this underdog revolution is Curaçao. Their story is different, but just as powerful. Curaçao is a Caribbean island with a population of around 156,000 people. It is the smallest nation by population and land area ever to qualify for a World Cup. To understand how small that is, the stadium hosting the final could hold more than half of Curaçao's entire population. That alone made their qualification historic. But their opening match seemed to confirm every criticism of the expanded World Cup. They were destroyed 7-1 by Germany. For the critics, it was proof. This is why the World Cup should not have 48 teams. This is why expansion waters down the tournament. This is why the smaller nations do not belong. For a few days, Curaçao became the example everyone used. Then they answered. 6 days later, they faced Ecuador, a serious South American team with elite-level defenders and players from major European clubs. Nobody expected much. Most people expected survival mode. But Curaçao produced one of the great defensive performances of the tournament. They held Ecuador to a 0-0 draw. The hero was 37-year-old goalkeeper Eloy Room. A goalkeeper who had spent much of his career away from the spotlight suddenly became the center of the football world. He made save after save after save, finishing with one of the most remarkable goalkeeping performances in modern World Cup history. At full-time, their 78-year-old coach, the oldest manager in World Cup history, was in tears. He said they had come from nothing and fought like lions. Room joked that he deserved a statue back home. And honestly, he might be right, because Curaçao did more than win a point. They changed the conversation. After losing 7-1, they could have disappeared. They could have become a punchline. They could have been remembered as proof that the expanded World Cup was a mistake. Instead, they refused to vanish. They took a point. They earned respect. And they reminded everyone that underdogs do not have to be perfect to matter. Sometimes, survival itself is history.
This is the contradiction at the heart of the tournament. FIFA expanded the World Cup to make more money. More teams, more matches, more markets, more broadcast value. But in doing so, they created a format with more doors than ever before. The top 2 teams from each group go through, plus the best third-place teams. That means an underdog does not need to dominate a group. They just need one shock result, one heroic draw, one clean sheet, one moment. And suddenly, they are in the knockout conversation. That is exactly what is happening. Cape Verde are not just surviving, they look like they belong. Curaçao were humiliated, then responded with defiance. And while the small nations are rising, some of the giants are slipping. Big names are under pressure. Historic teams are nervous. Expensive squads are discovering that reputation means nothing once the whistle blows. That is FIFA's nightmare. Not because the format failed, but because it may have worked too well. It gave the world's smaller nations a real chance, and now they are taking it. Every time Cape Verde or Curaçao move forward, a richer, more famous, more commercially powerful nation risks going home. And yet, for football fans, this is beautiful. Because this is what the World Cup is supposed to be. Not just a tournament for the same giants to trade the trophy between themselves, but a stage where the impossible can happen. Costa Rica did it in 2014, topping a group with Uruguay, Italy, and England. Morocco did it in 2022, becoming the first African and Arab nation to reach a World Cup semifinal. South Korea did it in 2002. Croatia, a country of just a few million people, did it again and again. These stories are not side plots, they are the soul of the World Cup. The trophy almost always ends up with a giant, but the memories often belong to the underdogs. And that is why this tournament suddenly feels alive. After the empty seats, the ticket prices, the travel chaos, the complaints, and the politics, the small nations have given the World Cup something pure. Joy, defiance, chaos, hope. FIFA built a bigger World Cup to make more money from the giants. Instead, it accidentally built the perfect stage for giant killers. Cape Verde, a nation of 500,000 people, are one result away from the knockout rounds. Curaçao, the smallest nation ever to qualify, have a point on the board and a goalkeeper who may become a national monument. And every step they take forward, the tournament becomes harder to control. That is FIFA's worst nightmare, and it might be the best thing about this World Cup. So now the question is simple. Which underdog are you backing? Are you riding with Cape Verde all the way to the knockouts? Do you believe Curaçao can shock the world again? Or do you think the giants will eventually take control? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe for World Cup coverage that follows the drama on the pitch and the money behind it.